Welcome to another video of Math with Jonas, where I take the complicated and make it simple. Today we're going to be looking at fractions, decimals, and percents, and how to go from one to the other. So how do I make a fraction a percent? How do I make a percent a decimal? And so on. If you're only looking for one specific conversion, I'll leave the timestamps in the description and you can go to what you're looking for. I would recommend checking it all out. They're all very much connected with each other. A couple different techniques, but otherwise they're all very much connected, especially in what they mean. And before we jump in, just a completely random tangent, but if you haven't ever listened to the song Layla by Eric Clapton, or I think with the band he did Derek and the Dominoes, definitely give it a listen. I just heard it recently, and that's why it's on my mind. Absolutely fantastic song. Anyways, with that out of the way, that meaningless stuff, let's just jump straight in. In our first conversion example, we're going to go from fractions and we're going to make them decimals. On this page, we'll look at the easy ones, meaning that the numbers in our denominators make the process easier. Not that these are going to be easy for you. And then we'll look at some where the denominators aren't the nicest numbers and what to do then. All right, so first thing we want to know is with a decimal. So if we have a bogus number like 1.23, first thing is after the decimal, these digits, these place values have names. The first one is the tenths. So if you took an object and broke it into 10 little pieces, that first one tells you how many of those you have. So this would be 2/10. The number over here, that arrow is out of control. Wow. Okay, learn the draw. This one is called the hundredths. And again, if you take an object and you were to split it up into 100 little pieces, this number here tells you how many of those little pieces you have. In this decimal, the 1.23, you can also say we have 23 hundredths in total. You got 2 rows of 10 and then 3 of the very small pieces. Okay, so when we start with this one, we have 3/10. So that's our fraction, 3 over 10, 3/10. And we want to make it a decimal. Well, it's literally, this one is just the definition of this place value. That means we have 3 out of 10, or we have 0.3. That says we have 3/10. And this fraction says we have 3/10. Those are the same thing. With 45 over 100, that's saying you have 45 hundredths. Okay. And we'll just write this one over here. So we don't have more than one, so we got 0 point something, okay? And we have 45 hundredths. So again, the way we write that, I can't shove 45 into one place value here. So we have 5, and then right in front of it we have 4. Okay, so again, you can think of this as being split up into 100 pieces. You have 45 of them. 5 little ones, and then 4 rows of 10 of all those little pieces. Okay, so far these are just based off of the place values. When you have something like 3/4, okay, that doesn't have we don't have fourths as a place value. We have tenths, we have hundredths, but we don't have fourths. So what you can do is, remember, with any fraction, you can multiply it by the same number over the same number, like 5 over 5, 10 over 10, whatever you want. Now in this case, we say, okay, can we multiply 4 with something easy to make it 10? No, not really. What about 100? Could we multiply it by something to make it 100? The answer is yes. 4 quarters in $1, so we can multiply it by 25. We have to write 25 up here. We don't have a choice. So we'll multiply both the 3 and the 4 by 25. And let's go down here. 3 times 25, well, that's 75. Again, you can think 3/4 makes 75 cents. And of course, 4 times 25 would get you to 100. So now we're looking at 75 over 100, or 75 hundredths. And so we can just write that as 0.75. So anytime your denominator is 10 or 100, and this also applies to 1,000 and 10,000 and so on, or you have a denominator in which you can easily multiply, or in some cases divide, by the same number over the same number to make your denominator 10, 100, or 1,000 in some cases, that's going to be the quickest way that you can make a fraction into a decimal. All right, let's move on to the next ones where it's not that simple. So you don't multiply 8 by anything to get 10 easy. And same thing with 100. 8 doesn't go into 100 evenly. So that gets a little bit more complicated. Not impossible, but that's not what we're going to look at here. So what I do, if I have a fraction that doesn't have a nice number, I do the short division. And if you go, what the heck is short division? I have a video up on how to do short division. I'll show you again here. It's much better than long division. If you can get short division down, you will never go back to long division. I promise you that. So we start. How many times does 8 go into 7? We write that over here. That's 0 times. And so let's just keep adding on to this number. So we can write 0.0 because 7.0 is still 7. We put our decimal here, so we want to put it in our answer now. And we say, how many times does 8 go into 70? And, well, 8 times 8 is 64. So we can say 8 times. But there was a remainder, so we got to keep going. So 8 times 8 was 64. And the difference between 64 and 70, that would be 6. So I'm going to put a little 6 over our next number, which we don't have a number here, so we have to just plug in another 0. And we say, how many times does 8 go into 60? If you're quick with your math facts, you should be able to come up with 7. 8 times 7 is 56. That leaves us another remainder of 4. So again, we don't have a number here, so let's plug in a 0. How many times does 8 go into 40? Well, that would be 5. And since 8 times 5 is exactly 40, we're done dividing. And 7 over 8 is going to equal 0.875. And our last example here, 1 over 6, again, not nice to multiply 6 by something to get 10 or 100. So let's do the short division. And again, 6 does not go into 1, so we can start off with 0. We can write 0.0 here. And so we can put our decimal here. So how many times does 6 go into 10? That's just once. Your remainder is 4. So we didn't get exactly 10. We got to tack on another 0 here because there's a blank spot. And now we ask, how many times does 6 go into 40? Well, that would be 6. And 6 times 6, or 6 times, that's 36. That leaves us with another remainder of 4. And we plug in a 0, and maybe you see it already that this is just going to keep happening and happening, right? I can write 6 again. That's 36. The remainder is 4. I plug in a 0. That's 6 again, so on. So it looks like I'll just write it the way I normally would write this, is 0.16. But since that 6 is just going to keep repeating, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, I put a little bar above it. So 1 over 6 is equal to 0.16 repeating. And that's going to wrap it up for changing fractions into decimals. And next here we have percents, and we're going to change them into fractions. So one key thing here is, I'll go ahead and put it down here. The word percent, obviously it has a definition, but it means something outside of its definition. So I'm going to actually write it with a big space in between. Per cent. and we're focused on this right now. Cent, I don't know what language it comes from. I don't know the language origins that well, but you can think like in a century, there's 100 years. There's 100 cents in a dollar. And I know there's that one word centurion. I don't know exactly what a centurion is. I don't know if it has to do with 100. I think it's like a gladiator. Is it a gladiator? I don't know. You can educate me on what a centurion is in the comments. I really don't know. Is it even connected to 100? No idea. But anyways, what percent means is per 100. It means per 100. So this symbol, it's got the line and the two, maybe I'm hungry. I'm thinking of donuts, but they got like two circles, whatever. That means per 100, 80 per 100, 9 per 100, and this terrible one of 0.5 per 100. And we want to write these as fractions here. So if we have 80 per 100, that means you have 80 out of 100. And bang, that's a fraction. Now, if you need to simplify, I'll go ahead and do that now. You can divide both the top and the bottom by 10. And since they both have zeros, we can just cross them out. That leaves us with 8 over 10. That can actually still be simplified. 2 goes into both numbers, so if you divide 8 by 2, you get 4. And we do the same at the bottom. We divide it by 2 and we get 5. So 80% is the same as 80 over 100. It's the same as 8 over 10. It's the same as 4 over 5. Okay, they're all ways of writing 80%. 4 over 5 being the simplest. So again, let's look at this. We have 9%. Let's use our wording here. We have 9 per 100. So we have 9 over 100. 9 per 100. And there's nothing, no number, boy, what a 9. Okay, we're trying that again real quick. I don't even know what that looked like. Not perfect, but better. So 9%, we have 9 over 100, and nothing divides into both of those evenly, so we'll leave it as 9 over 100. Over here we have 0.5%. 0.5%. So this one gets a little bit trickier in that, I mean, we could write we have 0.5 over 100. Nothing wrong with that, but I know some people, especially teachers, don't really want decimals in your fractions. So let's take a look real quick at what happened with 80 and 9, another perspective. So we put it over 100, or we took this number 80 and we divided it by 100, meaning this decimal at the end, we divided by 10, and then we divided by 100. It moved over twice. Same thing here, although I think I'm getting into the decimal land. So let me come back to that in decimal land. So let's just take it, my original idea. We have 0.5 over 100, right? Because it's percent per 100. And if we want to get the decimal out of our fraction, well, to move it right, we would need to multiply it by 10. And with a fraction, you want to multiply by the same thing top and bottom. So multiply by 10, that moves it once. And we get 5 over 100 times 10 makes 1,000. And so we can say 0.5% is 5 over 1,000. All right, here we have a different type of conversion. We're going from percents and we're going to turn them into decimals. So I think this is where I was headed a second ago, and I'll save it for this page. So you'll notice that percents are the same, but we're just going to change them into decimals. So again, remember this percent symbol means per 100. And in decimal language, that's when we were talking about the hundredths place. Right? That means per 100 as well. So really this 80% means 80 hundredths. So that would be 0.80. That's 80 hundredths. But what I was getting at is that you can also, a little trick is, you can take we have 80%, you can take the number 80, write it as a decimal. So I just put a decimal there. You can make it 80.0, that's fine. And you divide it by 100. So that's going to make the number smaller. So that means the decimal has to move left. I know sometimes students go, oh, does it go left? Does it go right? Just think, is my number supposed to be getting bigger or smaller? If we're dividing by 100, percent per 100, if we're dividing by 100, it's going to get smaller, so we have to move it once and twice. And our new decimal is going to end up there. And again, that is 0.80. So let's try that trick with 9%. So let's take the number 9 and put a decimal point after it. And I'll just keep putting a little 0 out here if I think some people will find that helpful. Now, percent means per 100, so we want to divide by 100 to change this into a decimal. So we move it once, and we move it twice. Notice that the second time we moved it, there was no number there. So we want to plug in an additional 0, and then we can write that where that new decimal goes. So 9% is going to turn into 0.09. And again, this says you have 9 hundredths. And that's the same as having 9%, 9 per 100, 9 hundredths. Okay, and this trick is super helpful for annoying numbers like this, 0.5% or half a percent. So 0.5%, just take the number, let's write it out, 0.5. And since we have a decimal already, I'm not going to add another 0 here. And percent, we want to make it a decimal, so now we have to divide it by 100. So again, make the number smaller, so we got to move it left once and twice. And again, we have this blank spot, we got to fill in a 0. Now we can put our new decimal point there. And so 0.5% is 0.005. Okay, wow. Fascinating, fascinating. I know, right? In our next example, we are going to look at taking a decimal and changing it to a percent. So this is just the vice versa of what we just looked at. So we're going to take a decimal and change it to a percent. Now remember on the last slide, we just divided by 100. On this slide, you just multiply by 100. So we take 0.35 and we multiply by 100, or we're going to move the decimal 2 place values. So 1, that makes 3.5. 2, makes 35, or 35.0. So simply put, we have 35%. And the language will back it up. This says 35 hundredths, and this says 35 per 100. Two different ways of saying the same thing. In the next one, we got 0.04. So again, we'll do our times 100. And since it's a power of 10, that means we can just move the decimal point. And this time we're making the number bigger, and that's why the decimal is going to the right. So 1, 2. So, and we'll put a decimal there. So if we have 0.04, or 4 hundredths, and we want it to be a percent, that's going to be a nice 4%. And in our last one on this page, we have 1.75. Again, we'll do our times 100 trick to go from decimal to percent. And times 100, move the decimal twice. Ooh, this is a pretty big percentage. Put the new decimal there. And so 1.75 is 175%. Now, one little clue you had with that one, how to know it's more than 100%? Well, the number we started with, 1.75, that was bigger than 1. So a good frame of reference is if you have the whole number 1, that represents 100%, right? I have one whole object. I have 100% of the object. And so this one was 1.75. So we knew it was over 100%. And you might see examples like that a lot in businesses. If you study finance, things like that. Sometimes you have to, or how about inflation? What's that inflation percentage? It feels like over 100%. My. All right. In this example, I'm going to move my face here. There we go. We got some examples on the left side. Wow, I'm feeling a little bit dizzy after that. In this example, or on this slide, we're going to take our decimals and we're going to make them fractions. And again, knowing that place value, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, knowing those is super helpful. All right, let's dive into this first one. So it says 0.2. So remember, this one is tenths. And just a fun fact, we use a tens system. Most people do, not every culture, but most people use a tens system, and that's why it goes straight to tenths. It's you take a whole object and you split it into that tenths, into 10 pieces, and that's because we're a tens system, and that's why. So there's no like ones on the right side of that decimal. That only exists on the left side. Okay, so we want to take this decimal, make it a fraction. We have 2 tenths. You're actually saying a fraction, 2 tenths. If you need to simplify, 2 can be divided by 2. 10 can be divided by 2. So we can write that as 1 over 5. That would be the simplified form. If we look at this next one over here, we've got 17 hundredths. 17 hundredths. And so as a fraction, we have 17 hundredths. And that doesn't simplify, so that's it. Voila. On the next one, we have 0.125. We're looking at an example of a decimal here's the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths place. So we have 125 thousandths. So 125 over 1,000. This definitely can be simplified. I'll do some of that heavy lifting for you. 125 actually goes into 1,000 evenly. So we're going to divide 125 up top. And we're going to divide that by 125 to get 1. And we'll also divide this bottom number by 125. We kind of have to. And that gets us 8. And I think 1/8 as a decimal, 0.125, I think that is the most underrated one to have memorized. I think that is a really good one. It is common enough in real life, even though I never use numbers. It comes up. It'll come up in your life. I think that one's a great one to know. It's amazing how many people tell me they don't use numbers at all in math. Math isn't used. I'm like, are you living? Are you even living? All right, let's look at this last one. This one is 0.06. Well, that means we have 6 hundredths. So we have 6 over 100. And a common mistake is to say 6 over 10, just because you only see one number. But you got to look at the place value, and it's in the hundreds place. If we divide top and bottom by 2, we can simplify that. 6 divided by 2 or cut in half is 3. And if we do the same thing with 100, cut it in half, we get 50. So 0.06 as a fraction is 6 over 100. And simplified, we can write that as 3 over 50. All right. In this one, this is our last conversion example. So we've looked at all the other ones. The last one we have is fractions to percents. And again, the easy section doesn't mean it's going to be easy for you to do. It just means that the numbers we're working with in our denominators, that's the bottom of a fraction, the numbers we're working with are easier to work with. They're nicer to us. On the next page, I think there's only 2 questions. Those ones we'll look at ones that aren't so nice. So our first one I'll start with is 33 over 100. We want to make that a percent. So remember, percent per 100. So this one's actually a straight translation. It's 33%. If you have 33 of 100 pieces, you have 33% of your object. That is by definition. Okay, but what about 14 over 25? That's not per 100. How is this a nice number? Well, 25 goes into 100 evenly. Again, you can think 4 quarters makes $1. So what we're going to do is multiply both the top and the bottom by 4. And remember, you have to multiply both the top and bottom of a fraction by the same number if you want to keep it the same value. So 14 times 4 is 56. And 25 times 4 is 100. And now this looks a lot like the one we just did. We have 56 over 100, so that just translates to being 56%. Percent per 100. 27 over 50, similar story. 50 goes into 100 evenly, so we got to multiply it by 2, but we have to do the same thing to the top of the fraction, where you're just changing the number. And this, you can't just do that. Let's start on the bottom. That's easier. 50 times 2 is 100. 27 times 2, that should get you 54. And again, when you have a number over 100, that just translates into the percent. We have 54%. Okay, now this last one on this page is 9 over 40. And you might be sitting there thinking, wait a minute, this doesn't multiply into 100 very easily. And it doesn't, but you can get there within 2 steps. So let's take a first step. So you have options here. What I'm going to do is divide the top and the bottom by 2. If you were thinking to do it by 4, that's not a bad move either, although I think this one's a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and go down here. Let's start with the easy one. 40 divided by 2 makes 20. 9 divided by 2, so half of 9, 4.5. And now we have a number, just like 25 and just like 50. Now we have a number that we quickly got to that can go into 100 evenly. And if you don't know, 25 times 5 makes 100. And now you know. And let's go ahead and write this down here. My big face is in the way. Again, let's start easy on the bottom. 20 times 5 is 100. And what is 4.5 times 5? Well, if you haven't watched my video about how to do some mental math tricks, the way I calculate this is 4 times 5 is 20. Okay, remember that. Put that off to the side. 0.5 times 5, 2.5. Now let's remember that 20 plus 2.5. We get 22.5. Of course, if you're not super comfortable with that, you can write it off to the side, 4.5 times 5, and calculate it out. You would also get 22.5. And now since it's over 100, that just translates into our percent, 22.5%. Awesome. Okay, and our last 2 examples for today. Again, we're going from fractions to percents. These ones might be a little bit less easy. Now, if you're like me, you're looking at this first one, 11 over 22. Actually, if you're not like me, you're panicking. You're panicking and going, 11? 22? These are terrible numbers. And you'll notice 22 doesn't multiply into 100 very nicely. But if you did notice something, if you're on top of it and you did notice something about this fraction, you can actually simplify it. So 11 goes into 11. 11 also goes into 22. So we can divide the top and the bottom by 11. Let's start up top. 11 divided by 11 makes 1. And on the bottom, 22 divided by 11 makes 2. You get 1/2. And let's just think about this logically. You can multiply to get the denominator to 100. Do the same thing up top. But just think about this logically. You have half. So you have half of an object. And remember, in percents, 100% is the whole object. You got everything. If you got 100% of it, you got everything. So what is half of that? Well, that's just 50%. Okay. So we get my zero's growing some hair on it, apparently. Might as well give it a face at this point. There we go. Okay. Now 3/8. If you're really ahead of the game here, and you know what your 1/8 is as a percent, you can just multiply that by 3. But I'm assuming most of you watching this don't know that off the top of your head. So let me show you my technique for going from a complicated or an annoying fraction to a percent. And what I do actually is turn it into a decimal. I turn it into a decimal, and then I make the decimal a percent, because that's a pretty quick process. So let's use the short division. 8 does not go into 3. So let's keep going on with this number. I put a decimal there. I put a decimal here. 8 goes into 33 times. That's 24. So there's a remainder of 6. I put it over the next number, which is blank. So I put in another 0. Now, how many times does 8 go into 60? I know 8 times 8 is 64. So this got to be 7. And that makes 56. So there's a remainder of 4. And again, we put that over the next number. And since we don't have one, we include another 0 here. How many times does 8 go into 40? That's 5 times. And that's evenly. So that's exactly 40, no remainder. We're done with the division. And we have turned 3/8 into a decimal, 0.375. Now we want to go from decimal to percent. And you can give yourself a little test. Do I remember? Do I remember what Jonas said earlier in the video for how to make a decimal a percent? Did I skip that section? Maybe go back. But the trick is here. You just multiply by 100. Basically, writing percents is like a way to write decimals without decimals. You know, it's like a group of people got together and said, we don't like decimals. We want a way to write decimals without decimals. Well, why don't we do this percent thing? And then we just don't have to write decimals. Hey, I think you're on to something, Bill. I don't know who Bill is. Trying to come up with the backstory. No, I got nothing for Bill. Anyways, we're going to multiply this decimal, 0.375. We're going to multiply it by 100. And since this is a power of 10, 100, 1,000, so on, that just means we shift the decimal over. Our number, we're going to multiply by 100, so it's getting bigger. So that means the decimal has to go right. And that would be times 10. And that's times 100. So we move it twice. Our new decimal goes there. And 3/8 as a decimal, 3/8 as a percent is 37.5%. And yeah, I don't think Bill saw that one coming because, yep, this percent still has a decimal in it. I apologize, Bill. My bad. That's it for converting fractions, decimals, and percents, and all the variations of that. If you like the video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and subscribe. And if you have any comments, like what a centurion is, you can leave it in the comments. And if there's any topics you want to see me do a video on, you can also drop it in the comments, and I'll do my best to make a video for you. All right, I'll see you on the next one.